Thank you. You'll notice that you are all muted, but this should not stop you from participating and asking questions. So if you have any questions at any point during the program or during the lecture, please utilize our chat box located at the bottom of your screen. So these questions will be answered by our guest speaker, our keynote speaker later on. We have very limited time as we don't want to keep you late. So we will need to follow a strict schedule, and we hope that this is all right with everyone. So at this point, I'm proud to formally introduce to you our guest speaker this evening. Dr. Robert Buenaventura is a magna cum laude graduate in clinical psychology and a board-certified psychiatrist with subspecialty training in psychogeriatrics from Sydney, Australia. He has more than 30 years of clinical and academic experience in both the private and public sectors and has occupied top-level managerial positions. Dr. Buenaventura is currently the Vice President of the Philippine Psychiatric Association, and he's also the Vice Chairman of the Specialty Board of Philippine Psychiatry. Aside from his clinical experience, Dr. Buenaventura also has more than 15 years of corporate experience as a consultant and as a director for various local and multinational companies, global companies, and has worked in Manila, Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney, Australia, and Princeton in the US. At present, he is an associate professor too for Human Lifespan Psychiatry at La Consolacion University College of Medicine in Malolos, Bulacan. He is also a consultant psychiatrist and visiting lecturer at the UERM Memorial Medical Center College of Medicine. Dr. Buenaventura is also a visiting lecturer at the School of Tropical Medicine and Global Health at the Nagasaki University in Japan. So without further ado, I'd like to invite all of you to please join me in welcoming Dr. Robert Buenaventura.
Okay. Mabuhay at magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Thank you very much, Ms. Carol Narcisa, for the very kind introduction, which of course I gave to you to read. So it's actually a very good opportunity for me to talk to you about this important topic. Actually, since the pandemic started in March 2020, well, the pandemic actually started earlier. Kaya lang the lockdown started March 2020 in the Philippines. This has been something that I've been frequently asked to talk about. So managing stress in the workplace is part of a module or a series of lectures that I do in a corporate setting and also in a clinical setting. Okay. And I hope that for this evening that you will be able to get something out of it. Okay. So my objective for this lecture is simply to provide an overview of stress as it relates to the workplace and steps that can be undertaken to manage it. So the key word here is overview. The truth of the matter is when we talk about stress, it's such a complex issue that that one lecture is often not sufficient to discuss all the important aspects about this matter. So what I'm going to present to you is primarily from the perspective of stress in the workplace. Okay, what are the common manifestations and what are some of the steps that can be taken to manage it from a corporate perspective. So to start with, let us get an overview of what we refer to as mental well-being. Okay. It is worthwhile to note that the United Nations Development Program has listed good health and well-being as its number 3 sustainable goal for this decade. With that in mind, let us define a couple of terms. While these terms are often used interchangeably, they do not appear to have exactly the same meaning. Well-being focuses on how we perceive overall ourselves and our life in a positive manner. So that's what well-being essentially refers to, how we look at ourselves and our current situation. While wellness is mainly the practice of healthy habits that contribute to our well-being. So wellness refers primarily to specific actions that the individual undertakes to be able to ensure well-being. But more often than not, these terms are used interchangeably. So we might as well do the same thing as far as this lecture is concerned. Okay. Now, our mental health can affect many different areas of our lives, such as work, school, or home life, relationships with others, vegetative functions such as sleep, appetite, and energy levels, cognitive functions such as our ability to think clearly or make decisions, even our physical health, and then, of course, our life satisfaction and more. So there's a lot of aspects when we talk about mental health. Let me emphasize that our mental health is just as important to our lives as our physical health. Allow me to remind you that mental health is not simply the absence of a mental illness. Okay? It includes emotional, psychological, social, and cognitive well-being. With that brief background, hopefully we have a better understanding of what mental health is. And now let us proceed to looking at mental health issues in the workplace. A study in the workplace commissioned by the Department of Health and done by the National Epidemiological Center showed that 32% of government employees, that's about a third, in 20 agencies in Metro Manila reported experiencing mental health problems at least once in their lifetime. Okay. The three most common diagnoses were specific phobias, alcohol abuse, and depression. And that's as far as government agencies are concerned. On the other hand, a study done at the Ateneo Bolato Center for Psychological Service among private companies in Metro Manila showed the top mental health issues in the workplace as the following. So job burnout at 76%, followed by irritability, lack of motivation, chronic physical complaints, and anxiety. In the same study, the respondents were asked what stressed them most. Just to emphasize that this study was presented in 2019. It was done much earlier, but presented in 2019, and therefore before the pandemic started. When I was talking about this early in the pandemic, we could take out yung commuting and traffic as a factor, but about 2 years later, we need to take back in traffic and commuting as work-related stressors. You know? So as you can see, technically, traffic and commuting are not part of one's work. Okay, but if we take that out, we would see that working beyond regular hours was a significant work-related factor. But stress does not just come from one area in our lives. As human beings, our lives are very complex. So that means we would have stressors that would come from other aspects of our lives, including family-related factors such as family conflicts, relationship with the partner, and having no helper at home. And then finally, general and health-related factors such as taking care of finances, concerns about future, and mental health concerns. But during the pandemic, what have we seen? In an online survey at the Philippine General Hospital and published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, the authors surveyed almost 1,900 individuals using scales for depression, anxiety, stress, and the impact of events. And they found the following. That 16.3% of the respondents had moderate to severe psychological impact. This is moderate to severe, not including mild, okay? And 16.9% had severe depressive symptoms, 28.8% had moderate to severe anxiety levels, and 13.4% had moderate to severe stress levels. I would like to emphasize that based on epidemiological data coming from the World Health Organization, published in 2017, so the overall rate of anxiety and depression in the Philippines was just about 3% each. Okay, so what we saw during the pandemic was a remarkable increase in the percentage of individuals suffering from anxiety and depression, and also in terms of stress as well. Now, so let's look at it from the perspective of a corporate setting. So we know that mental health would affect every business. So according to the Center for Mental Health in the United Kingdom, mental ill health cost employers an estimated 34.9 billion pounds annually, mainly through lost productivity. It was responsible for 72 million working days lost annually, and it cost business 1,300 pounds per employee whose mental health needs were unsupported. And managers at the front line, and managers are the front line to healthier environments as far as the corporate situation is concerned. 84% of UK line managers believe that they are responsible for employee well-being, which I thought was very remarkable because that showed a lot of compassion on the part of the managers. And almost half of line managers reported a wish for basic training in common mental health conditions. So a webinar like this that AEI is doing could contribute to be able to achieve that goal, that wish to offline managers to be able to, at least know something in terms of how to assist their employees who have mental health conditions. The same Center for Mental Health Studies document the cost of mental ill health also found that organizations can reduce this cost by up to 30% by implementing small changes, including mental health first aid training. So that means that a lot can be done even by doing small tasks, okay? Because there are long-term benefits to the organization as well, including reduced mental health stigma, which would lead to increased mental health literacy across the team, mental and physical well-being. Healthy employees make for healthy workplaces, of course, and developing or having a team of first responders. So employees and managers who know what to look for, do, or say in situation where you have an employee who has a mental health condition. So the idea here is that better emotional or psychological support at work will lead to better work. So one of the most common questions that I've often been asked in the last couple of years was, how do we identify employees who are at risk? Now, why do we need to identify them? The problem is, there is a problem as far as failure of recognition is concerned. So for many years, mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression were not discussed openly in the community. If someone breaks their arm, the process is simple. They get an x-ray, they receive treatment, and then they can begin recovery. Unlike physical injuries, such as broken bones, symptoms of mental illness may be deliberately covered up or unintentionally hidden. Okay, so this is not something that people generally would open up to another person or talk about, particularly with work colleagues. Oftentimes, individuals even hide it from their close family and friends, so much more so with their work colleagues. Thus, signs and symptoms of mental illness may remain unrecognized or just attributed to being associated with certain life stages, such as growing old, or such other transitions, such as getting married or having kids, some other stressful life events, hormones, or even personality traits. So we usually try to find a way to be able to explain this, not specifically looking in terms of the mental health nature of the condition. It is very common for people not to discuss mental health conditions with family members or friends, I've mentioned already. And there is even more stigma around mental health in cultures which are traditional or very conservative, such as the Philippines. But in more urbanized and more westernized countries, such as the United States, Australia, or Canada, they are very open about talking about this because there's much lesser stigma. Negative views or stigma about mental health are often due to misunderstandings, cultural beliefs, misconceptions, and or a lack of knowledge about mental health conditions and the associated signs and symptoms. So how can we identify those at risk? It is very important to take note of some of the warning signs or red flags. Again, I'd just like to emphasize these are just some, not all, because it can be very, very complex. We need to remember about individual human differences. So one individual may manifest stress in a different way as another individual. Okay. So these are some of those that we tend to see more commonly. And let's go through them one by one. So there could be changes in mood and emotions such as irritability, nervousness, loneliness, lethargy, apathy or lack of motivation, physical state changes such as fatigue, infections, stomach upset, stomach aches, somatic aches and pains. Okay. Disturbances in memory, such as poor attention or concentration, forgetfulness or confusion, impact on social relationships, such as social isolation and relationship problems, individuals' behavior, eating more or less, sleeping too much or too little, substance abuse, passive-aggressive behavior, restlessness and agitation, and of course, manifestations that can be more apparent at work. Okay, so occupational functioning may be involved, which can lead to lower productivity, absenteeism, which of course, as you know, absenteeism is self-explanatory, with increase in numbers of absences. But presenteeism may be a term that may be unfamiliar to some of you. It simply means that individuals who are not feeling well will report to work, okay, because they have deadlines or there's no one else to take over the work. So even though they do not feel well, they would show up at work, okay, which can either aggravate their stress or affect the quality of work. And then finally, job burnout. As you have seen earlier from the study from the Ateneo, that job burnout, 3 out of 4 individuals in a private corporate setting in Metro Manila manifested job burnout. So productivity losses due to mental health problems have been quantified in several studies. For example, research shows that there are more workers absent from work because of stress and anxiety than because of physical illness or injury. Can you imagine that? Because we would generally assume that physical illness, no, or injury would be the more common reason why people would take off from work. But the truth is, based on the World Health Report from the World Health Organization, it's actually more due to stress and anxiety. So that's a important point of consideration. Okay. So what are the costs of mental health problems? So we look in terms of direct costs, such as you know, decreased productivity, absenteeism, but there are other indirect costs. So this would include increased rates of short-term disability, safety incidents, absenteeism and presenteeism, as we have mentioned earlier, underperformance and unrealized output, stress imposed on team members. Because if a team member becomes sick and is unable to go to work, then usually some of their work may be passed on to other members of the team who are already doing more than enough. So the added work can affect them also negatively, so they can become irritable as well. Okay. And this can also lead to overtime and overstaffing to cover sick day absences and hiring costs related to recruitment and retention. So if you have an employee who becomes absent frequently, then you more likely would need to find someone to at least replace them temporarily to take over the work that they need to do. So, but as a company, you may want to consider providing some mental health services for your company as a result of what we saw earlier. So what are the levels of mental health services that may be available to companies and to their employees? Generally, we look at it in terms of 3 levels. The first level is in terms of primary prevention and mental health promotion. So that means we focus on trying to prevent employees from developing mental health conditions. Okay, we should not wait until they become ill when we decide to look for remedies, but rather look in terms of what we can do to help minimize or prevent them from developing mental health conditions. So that means you need to look in terms of modifiable risk factors. Sometimes you just need to look at the workplace setting. Is there proper ventilation, proper lighting? Okay. Are there opportunities to take breaks, no? Appropriate meals? Okay, so those are things that we need to consider as some items that can be very helpful in preventing or minimizing mental health condition. And you can also bolster protective factors. For example, you may have days off, mental health days off, or let's say like last Friday of the month, you have some activities for the employee. You know? So that's something that you might want to consider. You can also build workplace cultures that enhance health and well-being, or where employees feel valued, supported, and stimulated to perform at their best in work. Okay. And you can also provide information about mental health. So like you can have brochures, or like occasionally you may have educational classes. As Ms. Carol Narciso mentioned earlier, I worked in a corporate setting for more than 15 years. And in some of the companies that I've worked with, particularly like I'm going to cite a company that I worked with when I was in Australia. Okay, like I mentioned the last Friday of the month, So with this company, the last from 3 o'clock above, from 3 to 5 during the last Friday of each month, that's what we call socialization activities. So the main lobby, there will be wine or beer and then canapes, okay? And then people could just sit and relax, or sometimes if the host is Filipino or Filipina, they would usually have karaoke available as well, okay? So this gives you the opportunity for the workers to knock off early, no? And also that same company, because they own the building that we were working in. So there's a standing order that by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the air conditioning in the entire building is turned off. So of course then it starts to get warm. And then by 7 o'clock, the entire building is locked down and all the lights will be turned off. So if you get caught in there, you have to call security to be able to get out. So no one really likes to stay late because they know that you're going to be unproductive anyway. So it discourages people to do unnecessary overtime work and really forces them to go home to their families to spend better quality time. Second level is early detection and support. So if you have a worker who shows signs of mental health problems, what can you do? You can provide access to services. Some HMOs like MaxiCare and Telecare are already trying to incorporate mental health services as far as their packages are concerned, and have developing prompt referral for treatment. So you may not have an HMO doing that, but you can have, for example, sa speed dial, let's say na HR would be a psychologist, okay, or a psychiatrist who can provide counseling or psychotherapy for these individuals. And then finally, yung third level, which will be in terms of rehabilitation and recovery. So we need to monitor and support these workers, who are undergoing treatment to ensure recovery and rehabilitation as far as their condition is concerned. Okay. It would require, of course, a huge investment on the part of the company, but there are times that you can rationalize it, that you don't necessarily have to go to do so much. For example, there's a small company in Cubao. This company is primarily involved in graphic design and printing, and one of their employees is a very talented graphic designer who developed anxiety and depression. And this young individual, this young man, went to me for consultation. And the great thing about this is that the company supported his consultation. So he would pay me, I'll give him an official receipt, and then he would have it reimbursed with his company. So I thought that was very remarkable as far as this company was concerned. And I think one reason for that is, of course, because they value the services that this young man provided to the company. Okay. But we don't really need to think a lot about what we can do, because the World Health Organization in 2019 already came up with a guidance package. Okay, so what is this guidance package? What is the purpose? The package provides guidance for policymakers and planners on developing policies and comprehensive strategies for improving the mental health of populations, using existing resources to achieve the greatest possible benefits, providing effective services to persons in need, helping people with mental disorders to reintegrate into all aspects of community life, thus improving their overall quality of life. So as you can see, these are mental health policies and programs in the workplace. And just like to read the preface, the development and implementation of a workplace mental health policy and program will benefit the health of employees, increase productivity for the company, and will contribute to the well-being of the community at large. So as I've mentioned, one of the main concern more often than not of companies about providing mental health support for their employees is about the cost, because of course the cost can be big, shall we say. But again, we can rationalize it depending on what the needs are. But a study has shown, and this is based on a study that was led by the WHO, which estimated for the first time both the health and economic benefits of investing in the treatment of most common forms of mental illness globally. The study was on health treatment costs and outcomes in 36 countries. And that shows that all countries, regardless of wealth levels, but because not all some of the countries involved in the study were wealthy countries, shall we say, but there were also low and middle income countries. And this emphasizes that regardless of your wealth status as a country, as a nation, you still need to invest more in mental health services. Because the main finding of the study was that every $1 invested in scaling up treatment for depression and anxiety led to a return of $4 in better health and ability to work. So if you invest in an employee, okay, to be able to manage their mental health condition, you will get a return on that investment. Okay. And therefore, we are very grateful, therefore, that we already have Republic Act 11036, or the mental health law, which was signed by former President Duterte on June 2018, with implementing rules and regulations coming up the following year. So why is the ano yung significance ng mental health law as far as the workplace is concerned? The significance basically is because there is a section 25 that refers to mental health promotion and policies in the workplace. So employers shall develop appropriate policies and programs on mental health in the workplace designed to raise awareness on mental health issues, correct the stigma and discrimination associated with mental health conditions, identify and provide support for individuals at risk, and facilitate access of individuals with mental health conditions to treatment and psychosocial support. But these are overarching guidelines. Okay. But of course, as part of Section 25, we still need to consider a lot of other stakeholders. So the focus is on the employee, but there are other stakeholders that include the employer, Civil Service Commission, Department of Labor and Employment, the LGU, Department of Budget and Management, other professional organization, and then other stakeholders as well. So that means there is a need for consultation with other individuals, not just with those who may be directly affected, such as the employer and the employee. Fortunately, also, the Department of Labor and Employment came out with Department Order 208 in early 2020. This was released on February 11, 2020. And these are specific guidelines for the implementation of mental health workplace policies and programs for the private sector. Okay. So what can we learn from other countries that have implemented mental health care policies as far as the employees are concerned? An interesting example would be what is being done in Canada right now. Okay, they actually have a department of mental health in the workplace. So this department is designed primarily to look at what can be done to help the employees. So let's go through the top 8 practices that can be done as exemplified by Workplace Canada. Number 1 is to support employee participation and decision making. That means the employee should have a bigger voice, okay, as far as being able to express what their needs are, and also in terms of this, having some contributions in terms of, let's say, major decisions that may affect them as far as what the company would like to do. Number 2, define employees' duties and responsibilities. So this is going to be very helpful. For example, like how long are their working hours? What kind of breaks do they have? Okay, and what can they do when they get sick? Number 3 is to promote work-life balance. Actually, mali na tong phrase na to eh. The better phrase, as I've recommended, is to life work. No, so we need to put life ahead of work because life is more important than work. So we need to promote better life-work balance. Okay, so that means ensuring that employees have sufficient time to be able to bond with their families, not spending too much time at work. One of the biggest problems about the work from home situation, particularly in the midst of the pandemic, was that employers were messaging or calling or emailing employees, even during weekends, no? Even during late hours, because the employers were thinking, oh, but he or she is just at home. So I'm sure he or she wouldn't mind if I call him or her at 8 o'clock on Sunday evening. Okay. So because they're just at home anyway. Okay. So of course that was totally wrong. Okay. Number 4, encourage respectful behaviors in the workplace. So that means everyone should be provided appropriate courtesy, and appropriate respect, not just in terms of their personhood, but also in terms of what they are doing as valued employees. Number 5, manage workloads. So ito yung as part of maintaining life-work balance, ito yung ensuring that that they work the right number of hours. Okay, if there's a need to go overtime, to do overtime, that they are properly compensated for that. Okay, um, there are employers kasi who keep how do you say that, they put the guilt trip on the employees that, if um if you don't seem to be a team player because you stop work at 5 o'clock, you don't even try to extend your work a little bit longer, like 1 or 2 hours, to be able to reach our goals. So to them, they expect the employee to do longer work hours without properly compensating them. Number 6 is to provide training and learning opportunities. Each one of us needs to be able to develop or become a better employee. So that means the company should also ensure that all employees would have the opportunity to improve themselves, improve their skills, so that training and learning opportunities should be provided as well. Number 7, conflict resolution practices should be in place. I've had a consultation before in which the company was unable to provide enough opportunities to be able to resolve conflicts between employees. Okay, so they would just let the employees try to manage it on their own, which of course can be very difficult. Okay, because you need oftentimes someone to mediate. Okay, so conflict resolution practices would be very helpful. And then finally, recognize employees' contributions effectively. Oftentimes, people think that this can be a very expensive matter. But the thing is, for a lot of individuals, there is such a thing as a tap on the back, a pat on the back that can be more than enough to bolster their self-esteem. So when the employer recognizes the quality of work that the employee does, no, and gives them commensurate praise, particularly in front of other employees, di ba? That makes the employee feel better and even more motivated. Oftentimes, for some individuals, that's even more important to them, like getting a keychain, okay, to commemorate the quality of their work. No, oftentimes praise may be sufficient in being able to recognize employees' contributions effectively. Okay, so some of the suggested programs that have been done since the mental health law came out was, for example, like having 2 hours twice a month psychosocial or socialization activities for employees, like the example I gave earlier about the company that I work for in Sydney, in which the last Friday of the month was devoted to socialization activities. Regular emergency consults with mental health professionals, with private office space for consult. There was a time I worked with one HMO to be able to do in-house consultations for a publishing firm. Okay, annual mental health checkups and immediate referral if needed. So you can include mental health screening as part of their APEs, no, in annual physical exams, and so not just checking their blood pressure, but also ensuring that that they're not suffering from significant anxiety or depression, and providing enhancement of total well-being. No, may mga packages na to. There are a lot of individuals or companies that offer this as an independent service, no. But bigger companies I work for, no, not I work for, but I consulted recently and I gave a lecture to a huge retail chain. Okay, and I was very impressed with the amount of investment that the company had as far as ensuring total well-being for their employees were concerned. So there were, for example, like every day if someone had a birthday, so over the intercom and through the email, there'd be announcements like today is the birthday of Joseph. So let's greet Joseph. He's turning 28. Okay. So, so things like that. And then they can get a small cake, like a cupcake lang, and then they can blow a candle during lunch break or coffee break or whatever. But such recognition often can be very helpful as well, particularly for individuals who feel that no one's paying attention to them. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, inclusion of mental and neurological care in HMO packages. What are the challenges? I mentioned earlier, it's not often very easy. So that's why companies like AAI, for example, can help other companies try to see in terms of what they can do, what resources are available, how much how much investment they would like to provide. Okay, and then some oftentimes a program can be tailor fit as far as the specific needs of companies are concerned. So one of the questions that we can ask is how realistic and feasible are these given the conditions in the country, such as, of course, there's also, as you know, a lack of manpower or human resources for this. So lack of psychologists and the cost of resources. So I've mentioned this can be dealt with in terms of what is available and what can be done to be able to fit the budget. What about inputs from DOLE? So the Department of Labor already have their department order, labor groups, employees, etc. How specific can these requirements be, and who will give them in the absence of the qualified resources? So like if you don't have an on-site HR individual, then you can identify individuals who may be able to do this. Okay, and then finally, there's a need for more information, capacity, resources of companies, manpower resources, process of policy development, to things like that. Are there actually other companies that can help your companies develop policies? Parang that's their job. So their role would be to facilitate this, especially if you. I was once contracted by a company to do the policy for them. So the first question I asked is, do you have a policy on policy development? Okay, because that would be the first step that I would have to look into, because the policy that I would craft for them has to conform with other policies that are already in place within the company. Because if I don't do that, if I craft a policy for them, it might turn out that the policy that I'm crafting for them is in conflict with other policies that are already in place. It can be a very complex procedure. That's why it's often helpful that if you're going to craft a policy on this issue about mental health in the workplace, then you need someone who's already familiar with other corporate policies to ensure that everything will fit in the right place. Okay. Let's also look again at an example in terms of what can happen, what will be the benefits of a psychologically healthy workplace, again, from Workplace Canada. Sabi nila nga, so this can lead to better engagement, better morale, better satisfaction, better retention and recruitment, and better productivity. And it can help reduce absenteeism, reduce grievances, reduce health costs, reduce medical leave and disability, and reduce workplace injuries. So employers should assess their workplace for hazards, whether physical or psychological, then develop a plan to address and mitigate those hazards. Okay. So in summary, I'd like to emphasize that we have seen the extent of mental health issues in the workplace and have now a better understanding of the importance of mental health. We realize the importance of early recognition and the provision of support to affected individuals. Mental illness isn't something to be ashamed of. People shouldn't be embarrassed to reach out to a professional and get treatment. With proper support and cooperation, we will be able to rise above this and move forward with the goal of being able to thrive, not just survive. And then finally, we'd just like to emphasize again that there's no health without mental health. Before I end, if you could take a screenshot of these numbers, I'd like you to take note of these crisis hotline numbers. You can share this with with people who might be going through a very stressful period in their lives, or post this at the common areas at work. These hotlines are free, no payment. They are available 24/7. They are confidential, and they are run by trained counselors. So that means the person who's going to answer the call is not an ordinary telephone operator. The person who's going to take your call is a trained counselor. So they have been trained to provide psychological first aid. So again, just like to run through. So we have the crisis hotline from In Touch Foundation, and then Hope Line from the Natasha Goldborn Foundation. And finally, the crisis hotline from the National Center for Mental Health. So hope you took note of these numbers, because you never know. Kasi yun na nga, sub-mention, whether it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon or 2 a.m. early morning, if you're under stress and you need someone to talk to, please call these numbers. Okay, they are trained to deal with individuals under stress and even suicidal individuals. And in that, I'd like to end my lecture and to thank you for your kind attention. Mabuhay at magandang gabi po muli sa inyong lahat. So I turn it over back to Ms. Narciso.
Thank you, Doc Bong. Thank you
Hi,
for
Ma'am
that
Det.
very
Thank you, Ma'am Det.
hi. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and thank you for that very interesting discussion on mental health in the workplace. So I think it's very interesting. What one of the things that I like about what you said is about life-work balance. It's not
Yes,
work-life, no, but life-work. We should really put more emphasis on life.
true. I agree.
I also like what you said about, kasi usually, especially when we talk about the corporate setting and we talk about new programs that we need to do, it's always the cost that comes to mind. But
Mhm.
there are
Yeah.
ways to also rationalize this. And we also have to think of the reverse. What is it costing us if we don't do anything about it?
Right. Oh,
Yeah,
very
so,
good point. Thank you.
yeah, so before I talk more, let me look at the questions that we have. There are several questions in the chat box. So first is, has there been any Pinoy organizational study that has been done?
Actually, marami, no? If you're a member of, naku, yung PMAP stands for Personal Management Association of
Yes.
Philippines, is that right? Okay. They actually, during the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, I was, in fact, their first speaker on these issues. And then there have been a lot more. So if you go to their website or even their Facebook page, you will see that they have uploaded a lot of lectures since the lockdown started. And if you have time, you can just sift through it and choose, no, which ones do you think would be helpful for you. So at least as a first point of reference, I would suggest the PMAP website.
So thank you for sharing that. So we'll all take a look at that and maybe share it also with our attendees when we send them an email after this. Egay also sent a question, with the current financial situation of some companies, will these be realistic to implement if costly for the organization?
Kaya lang kasi the question there is cost versus cost effectiveness. Like what you mentioned, Det, di ba? What we don't want companies to go through would be the sin of omission, di ba? Yung wala tayong ginawa even though we knew that there's a problem that existed. So that's why my last few slides were more in terms of looking at that and balancing in terms of what resources are available and what resources can be provided. Okay, but first and foremost is to have at least something in place. No? And then you can explain to the. I see a lot of employees, no, people who work in a private setting, in a government setting. In fact, I have one shall we say physician there. A government physician. So I was out of curiosity asking, don't you get your medications for free since you're working for the government? He said, no, we don't. We don't get them for free. We still have to buy them. And ganon. So which is truly unfortunate, no, gobyerno na yun, ano. So how much more in a private setting, particularly in companies that may not have sufficient resources. But what I'm saying also is that look also in terms of what you can actually provide, because rather than thinking na, oh, we can't afford that, think first of what you can actually do. As I've mentioned, so oftentimes just providing information about mental health, no, about like well-being, like providing them links. Sabi mo nga, Deti, like with PMAP, just providing links like that.
Yes.
So if you go to YouTube, there's so many resources available. I go to YouTube for well-being, like meditation and mindfulness. I go to YouTube because there's a lot of resources, So yung ganun, so like someone can collate some and provide it in a brochure or something that can be sent out as an email, and then pati itong numbers na binigay ko. So this is something that you can even send out in a email blast to other employees, So if you're feeling distressed, there are available numbers that you can call. Okay.
That's right. Actually, I think what's good now is that there is more focus on mental health. So even that assurance lang na the company is doing something about it. So little things, diba?
Yes, little things, exactly.
If the employees know that you're doing something about it, like for example, like kami kunyari, mental health leave is part of sick leave. So we're very open about it. So even that I think helps.
Yes.
And then what you said kanina, di ba? Even it doesn't have to be costly. Even a pat at the back is
Yes. So,
already a big deal for most
Mm-mm.
people. And knowing that you care, I think, also goes a long way, right?
mm-mm,
So
mm-mm.
there. We have quite a lot of other questions, so I'll go to that. So first, they're asking if they can have your deck. So
Oh,
we
di
will.
ba I provided a
Yes,
copy,
yes,
no? Oo.
yes.
Kay
So
Marshall.
yeah, this is lang my cue to say yes. We will be sending a copy of the deck, and then we will look for the PMAP link, and maybe when we send the deck, we'll also include that, so you don't have to look for it. Marshall, take note, ha? I might
Yep.
forget.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
May
So
trabaho si Marshall.
ha, oo. Kasi baka makalimutan ko. No? Siya na lang,
Trabaho naman
responsibility niya.
responsibility naman talaga. No?
Homework niya. And then how do we deal with employees who refuse help
Ay,
from Carl?
thank you very much. That's a very important question. Okay, huminga muna ako malalim kasi this can be a complex question. Kasi there's a thing, of course, individual human rights. So, in fact, there are individuals who do not want to be identified as having a mental health condition. So that's why they resent it, diba? When people come to them and said, "Oh, you look so worried, you look anxious. Are you okay?" Yung mga ganun. Yung 'di ba nainis sila? No, I'm fine, no. Because yun na nga, and I think a lot of this results from the stigma nga that we have about mental illness. So people themselves, even though they, at the back of their minds, they're aware that they're going through something, refuse to acknowledge it. Nasa denial sila because yun na nga, they don't want to be labeled as having a mental health condition. So that's one reason why they refuse help. Unfortunately, that kind of denial can lead to a further aggravation of what they're going through. So how do we help my advice often is to get someone whom they trust, who they look up to talk to them, no, because they would often more likely trust this person. So it could be their direct supervisor, it could be the parish priest, no, it could be an older relative, no, or a close sibling, no. So let's look for the individual who can talk to them and more likely help them come to a better realization.
That's good. We shouldn't really force ourselves, no?
Yes. So.
Marami pang tanong. Are employees working from home better off than those who are in the office?
Again, that's an excellent question. In one way, yes. In one way, no. Okay. The thing about working from home, that one of the biggest frustrations of employees who were working, I'm talking about during the height of the pandemic, na 100% silang working from home, was they lost the sense of camaraderie with their co-workers, diba? Especially if you have a good working environment and you enjoy working with the people that you work with, diba? You look forward to going to work, diba? You're excited na pagdating mo doon, hey, good morning, diba? Yung ganon. So diba, that's a good. So tapos merong iba din kasi, like their line of work, like in sales, diba? Outward looking sila, no? Because they like to interact and deal with their customers. So when those opportunities for camaraderie and for interaction with customers were taken away during the pandemic, then it made them feel isolated, it made them feel anxious, and to a certain extent also depressed. Okay, so that was one of the disadvantages of working from home, is that it tends to make you feel isolated and decrease interaction with key people as far as your working life was concerned. The advantage, of course, was and also could be seen as a disadvantage, was that they were with close family members, with their families and ganon. Kaya lang, one of the common complaints ng mga working from home was that when other people in the household think that they're parang naglalaro lang, so they will disturb the working from home na, oy, gusto mong kumain yung, I'm in a meeting, yung ganon, diba? Yung ganon. So that's why often my advice to those working from home during the pandemic, I told them na create a permanent working space, no? Kasi like if you transfer from your bed to the living room people will think you're just surfing the internet. But if you create a permanent working space na nandito ka, and then you tell people, no, kahit chalk mark lang yan, kahit masking tape lang yan sa sahig, this is my working space. When I am in here, I am working, so please do not disturb me unless the house is burning or something like that. So there would be a recognition. Tapos I also advise them if they're working from home, this they do the same routines that they would do like when they would go to like they dress up as well kasi yung
Yeah.
iba naman naka-work nakasando at
Uh-uh.
boxer shorts.
Yeah.
Pag ganon, then you don't feel like you're working. Sabi ko, no, you do. I learned this actually because when I work in a clinical contract research organization, almost all of us were in a work from home setup. And this was pre-pandemic, you know. So I learned from one of the clinical research associates that yun na nga, she created the workspace for, tapos meron pa siyang vase with flowers, ano.
Wow.
Yes, to enhance. Ano, may lamp pa siya, yung ganon. And she told her husband and her kids, no, when I'm in this place, please do not disturb me. So yun, ang advantage din kasi nung working from home, malaki din yung ano mo, tipid mo in terms of yung time through going to and traveling to and from work, at saka syempre yung papamasahe din, which can be very substantial. So it's a matter of being able to balance it, and then also depende sa personalidad. Kasi I found out mga introverts, they really enjoyed working from home, yung ganon, ano. So kasi sila, they didn't feel isolated, di ba? Sabi nga nila, that's why they were very happy when the lockdown happened, because to them that was a blessing in disguise. But only for introverts, okay? Pero yung mga extroverts, not so much. Yun.
So the introverts were able to work in their own little space.
Yes, true.
Yeah.
It worked well for
Yeah.
them.
But I agree with you, no, that putting up your own routine, like me also, talagang, I really dress up because that's my sign that I'm going to work already. So it's psyching myself up also that it's work time.
True.
Yeah. So, and then for those naman who travel, I guess stressor rin yung ano, no, diba? One of the biggest stressors in traffic. So, nare-reduce.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So we have other questions, if you don't mind. There's one here on when do we refer a stressed employee for professional evaluation?
Okay. Yes. I should have included this as part of the ano. Kasi aside from identification is yun na nga yung the issue of when do you refer. Okay. There are three things that I would like to highlight. Okay. And this is in terms of our overall function. So the first one is in terms of personal function, which refers to personal self-care. So kung hindi na naliligo, hindi na nagbibihis, no, hindi na nagtutoothbrush, iba, that's a different sign already, no. Tapos number two, yung interpersonal relationships. So yung kahit introverted yan, I mean, they wouldn't isolate themselves from other individuals within the family, di ba? They would still relate, ano. So if they're, yun na nga, talaga nagkukulong na sa kwarto or refuses to, let's say, especially if the for people who are living alone, like they don't answer their phones, no, if there's someone's trying to call them, yung ganon. So those are warning signs. And then finally, yung occupational function. So we've already mentioned that, like yung decreased productivity, yung mga ganon. So if you have those signs, then I would generally suggest to the individual to seek at least assessment, no. Kailan ba yun? The other night, Tuesday night, I was in a discussion with other psychiatrists, kasi sometimes some of the words we use may have a different meaning to other individuals. Kasi for example, like when we say, oh, you need therapy, so that means is there something wrong with me? That's why I need therapy already. So that's why we, like in my case, I would recommend to the individual first to have an assessment, diba? So why don't you seek an assessment or a consultation so that you can find out if there's something that needs to be dealt with, rather than telling the patient right away you need treatment, kasi that implies that there is something wrong. So kami din on our part, we need to be very careful about how we approach the situation with individuals.
So there's like a defense, no? Defense mechanism.
Yeah, true. That's so that they hindi sila defensive agad.
Thank you, Doc Bong. There's another one here. Can you elaborate on how stress or job burnout comes about? How does it come about?
Oh, thank you for that question. It's actually can be very complex because it depends on what we call si Ma'am Det already alluded to this, yung defense mechanisms natin or coping mechanisms, So it depends on how strong you are, how well-founded your personality is. So that means may analogy dyan, di ba, like water off a duck's back. Kasi ang mga duck ganun, kaya that's why they float on the water, kasi may oil yung ano na, kaya yung sa atin, sometimes stress can just, like water off the duck's back. Yung talagang hindi tayo maapektuhan kasi nga matibay yung maganda yung personality natin, maganda yung pakikitungo natin. So what I'm saying is, if you have a particular vulnerability to anything, then stress can affect you more than others. So that's why you need to look inside yourself first. That's why the first step, kasi di ba kanina nabanggit natin about denial, ang katapat nun is self-awareness, no? So how self-aware are you in terms of what your strengths are, okay? And you would know that, especially if you're already in your mid-20s, no? Kasi by that time, by early 20s, namumuo na yung personality natin, By mid-20s, it becomes more solidified. So makikilala na natin kung sino tayo. So one gauge in terms of whether we have a good or bad personalities in terms of how people react to us, no? So if you have a lot of people coming to you, like saying, that's just even saying good morning, or asking you for advice, that means people like you, people trust you, people believe in you, no? Especially if people look up to you. So that means may maganda yung personality mo. Pero kung nag-good morning ka sa isang tao tapos hindi ka man lang
Nirapan ka.
nirapan. Lalo, parang walang narinig, dinedma ka. Mes, ibig sabihin yun, bakit kaya? Bakit ako ini-ignore? Lalo na kung hindi lang isang tao, 2 tao na yung good morning mo, wala pa 3, wala pa rin. Yung bang lahat na, the entire office floor, binati mo na, nag-intercom ka pa, tas wala pa. Yun na, may pag-isipan na natin. So yun, that's one gauge din kasi. Tapos you think also in terms of, do I get irritable easily? Do I get irritated? Kasi yung iba na late lang yung, let's say, yung waiter pagkuha ng order nila, galit na sila, di ba? Or nakita nila ang haba ng pila sa bayad muna, yung mga ganon, yung pagbayad ng bills, naiinis na talaga sila. So may kita mo yung ganon, you get triggered. Kasi yung iba chill lang sila, habang naghihintay, they'll scroll or listen to music, yung ganon. So maganda yung defense mechanism. Pero yung iba naiinis, magrereklamo na ako, haba-haba ng pila, ang bagal-bagal ng teller, yung ganon. So may kita mo yung response mo, okay? So yun, so you think first in terms of how you react to situations like this and what triggers you, okay? Because doon mo malalaman whether you have good coping skills or not. If you have good coping skills, then you should not worry about stress, because for sure you'll be handling stress in a better way. But if you have very poor coping skills, you find yourself very irritated easily, yung mga ganon, and then no one wants to interact with you, then that should tell you that something needs to be done. I'm not saying that something is wrong. It may not necessarily mean that, but I'm saying is that you could probably improve your coping skills and human interaction to be able to deal with stress in a better way.
So, Doc Bong, does that mean that generally people who tend to behave that way are more prone to becoming anxious easily?
True. Tapos there are other factors also, kasi I'm just talking about personal factors.
Yes.
Meron pa din tayong psychosocial factors. For example, a lack of social support, di ba? So people are great, they define the need. They find themselves having. I have a patient right now. Okay. Okay. When she was at home with her 2 sisters, they're orphans na eh. She was great. Tapos she was promoted sa job niya. Tapos part of her promotion, she has to go to Germany for 4 weeks training. Okay. So pagdating niya sa Germany, na homesick siya. So she started just crying, mga ganon-ganon. Okay. So yun, so then, kasi alam mo naman, online consultation naman, so very easy. So yung ganon. So yung okay ka when you have your psychosocial support system, if you have a safety net natin, tapos you get uprooted, they bring you to a country, tapos ito pa, they bring you to Germany, bihira na. Although in the workplace nag-i-English, pero paglabas niya ng Germany, paglabas niya ng office, sprechen sie Deutsch silang lahat. Diba? Ikaw naman, ano ba, yun. So siguro kung nasa Amerika siya or England, she might probably not find it so challenging because of the ingay. So may kita natin that a lot of us can be strong, but sometimes when we're taken out of our comfort zone, yung defenses natin may crumble and therefore we can get affected. So, and that's why when we talk about individuals under stress, we need to look at different factors din naman talaga to be able to understand why this individual is kasi kung titingnan natin, like being sent to Germany for training is a good sign because that's part of your promotion, but on the other hand, it isolates you from your loved ones, it puts you in a situation where you are unfamiliar with the language, and may lead to isolation, yung mga ganun. So yun, so titingnan natin from different angles.
So thank you. There's another here. There's a recommendation for Ateneo Accords CARES program. It's also an option though for mental health.
No, that's good to know. I'm not familiar with the program, but it's good. Pero ang primary resource kasi sa Ateneo is CFAM, yung Center for Family Ministers. So I know they do a lot of good work. So that's why even some of my patients that need marital therapy, family counseling, then I refer them to CFAM. So I'm not familiar with that Ateneo Accords CARES program, but I'm sure it's great. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
So I think Tricky, you were the one who shared that. Maybe you can also share the link. And then we have also another question. Can workplaces and employers request for cause counseling or psych evaluation referrals? Are employers protected from what may be misconstrued as an intrusion to the worker's privacy?
That would depend on your internal policies as well. Okay. Pero I think like may dictum din tayo, 'di ba, yung first do no harm. As long as the intent is clearly to the benefit of the employee, then I think we won't parang hindi magiging mali yung kasi nga because of what your intention is. But it should be clear also in terms of ano yung internal policies, and I would suggest na rin siguro consulting Dole about that. I'm not too familiar with the specific recommendations or guidelines about this, but ang naintindihan ko lang is that yun nga, if your intention was good and your intention was pure primarily to help the employee, then I don't think you'll be in the wrong about that.
So it should not be a problem, but better to still consult Dole para sigurado. All right. Thank you for sharing the link. So we have here the link for CARES in the chat box. Another thing that we can share, Marshall, when we send out the deck, 2 links being attached with
Yes,
this
we'll
email.
include it. We'll include it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And then I think this must have been a comment when you were talking earlier. You were answering some questions. Diathesis stress model.
Yes. Stress diathesis model. Actually, that's the phrase we more commonly use in a clinical setting. Kaya lang but that's a general term. Pero yung stress diathesis model, that's a parang an etiological theory, particularly for patients who develop schizophrenia. Yung growing up, particularly like living in an urban setting in which yun na nga, it's maingay, it's magulo, tapos you may feel isolated. But so it's one of our primary theories as far as the etiology of schizophrenia is concerned. But of course, it can also be applied generally with other mental health conditions. Pero that's a very good point. Pero yung extension na yun, that's a extension to a clinical setting, which I wanted to avoid because I just wanted to focus more in terms of what can happen more likely in a corporate setting. Pero thank you for mentioning that, but I would use that more in terms of a clinical setting kasi.
Okay. One more question. How do you professionally tell an employee who needs counseling that you're currently not fit to listen at the moment?
Oh, thank you. Yes. That's very good. You can gently mention it at the start. Okay. Going back to the UK study, Center for Mental Health, most of the managers wanted to. Okay, and that's why half of them felt that that they should be trained. But it's so what my suggestion would be is that it should be clear at the outset that there's let's say you can have a company policy na for employees who would like to talk to someone in a professional setting, who would like to vent or just express themselves, that like this would be there would be identified individuals, no? For example, like an HR associate. But if there's no one in the office, then you can have like on call, someone on call, yung ganon. Tapos if the employee is really in distress, yung ganon, you can refer them, you can share with them the numbers that I shared earlier. Hopefully they would call that, they would try to call those numbers. But I'm glad you pointed that out because truth to tell, it's not very easy to be listening. Kasi siguro kung hindi ako psychiatrist, I would also break down listening to people talk about their problems day in, day out. Okay? But the thing is, kasi kami, syempre, like psychologists as well, nag-train, di ba? And guidance counselors din, di ba? Nag-train to listen to individuals. But if you feel that not only do you feel that you're not qualified, but like it's outside your expertise, I'm very glad you pointed that out because first and foremost, we need to protect ourselves then because we may actually be a vulnerable individual so that listening to someone talk to us about their problems might make us distressed as well. So make sure that it's clear to everyone that in the office na if you need someone to talk to, these are the resources available. Okay, please you can add, please do not talk to your manager, right? Okay, because your manager may also be under stress. You can have a warning like that. Okay. But if you are willing to, you can express it to your team. Let's say like you have a team of 3 or 4 individuals under you, then you can tell it to them personally. Hey, if there's something that I can help you out with, just let me know. We can talk private. Okay. But if not, then you can always use that company policy na please use these resources. Okay.
So that's why it's good also to have these contact details handy, so we really know where to direct our employees to.
May I add something about that?
Sure.
So I mentioned earlier, I did this in a project with a publishing firm. We did this for about 6 to 9 months. Okay, so I would go on site. Okay, unfortunately, people knew who I was because there was an announcement. We will have a psychiatrist coming over. He will be using this room. Anyone who has will schedule with HR, and then they will. So eventually, nagdwindle kasi people knew who I was kasi tapos nakikita nila
Sino pumupunta? Sino pumupunta?
Sinong pumupunta?
Hindi anonymous.
Yun na nga. So eventually when I noticed that myself, so I had to talk with them. Unfortunately, they could not provide any other venue. Okay, kaya na-stop yung program din eh. Kasi people were very conscious, di ba, about, kasi siyempre, kahit pa paano may stigma pa rin. So, although there were a lot of employees who availed of that and benefited from that program, unfortunately, yun nga yung concerns about privacy and concerns about stigma, nandun pa rin, kaya natigil yung program. Sayang.
Sayang nga. Kasi siguro ayaw rin nila nakikita sila going to you. Yeah.
Kasi siyempre private consultation.
Not so private because
not so private
because they know they're going to. Okay, so we've asked all the questions in the chat box. If there's anybody else who has a question, you can also unmute yourself if you want to ask it verbally.
Sige, sure.
Okay, let's see if there's. But I think not, Doc Bong, there are so many things talaga that we can do as individuals. I mean, like we don't, for our listeners or our audience today, a lot of them are part of the HR team. So there are a lot of little things that we can do within the organization, like even setting up these engagement activities are really a big deal.
Yes.
And then even those who may not be involved in HR, even as like employees ourselves, just observing our coworkers. Like kanina, I like what you said na just looking at their habits. If something changes, it could be a sign. So being very sensitive also to the people we work with also helps, diba?
True, I agree.
So I think we don't have any other questions on the board. So at this point, Doc Bong, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us this evening. We're always very happy to have you.
Thank you, Ma'am Det.
So we'd like to present you with this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Robert Buenaventura, or who we fondly call Doc Bong, for sharing his valuable knowledge with us today in terms of managing stress in the workplace. So in the corporate setting during our mental wellness series. So today, of course, the 20th of October. So thank you again, Doc Bong. We know that you're extremely busy, and we're very happy that you were able to carve out this time for us, this evening for us. So for all of you who are in the audience, thank you also for joining us, because I know that this is also beyond work hours. Nako, sabi pa naman ni Doc Bong, that's also a contributor of stress, working beyond work hours. So, but thank you for joining us. I know that the past 2.5 years have given us a lot of stress factors, and it's good that we're finally getting into the now normal. And I think one of the things that we should remember from what Doc Bong also said is we have to have that life-work balance, put more emphasis on life. And then, of course, we should also think that there are a lot of little things that we can do to help one another. And for those of us who have those of us who can actually create programs or recommend programs, it may seem costly, but as Doc Bong also shared, there are a lot of actually contributions. No, I remember the $4 return that these programs can have when we are able to make sure that our people, our talents are kept mentally well. So thank you once again. And at this point, can we ask all of you also to please turn on your video so we can have a souvenir photo? Is that okay? Before we leave. So let's. Thank you also for all your questions. As Doc Bong said, they were very helpful. We were able to get more insights coming from the questions that you asked.
Yes, thank you very much for the questions.
We have a lot of thank you messages, Doc Bong.
Salamat din po.
So let's give them a few seconds to turn on their videos. Thank you for sacrificing your dinner and having late dinner tonight to join us. And so let me count now. So they can smile. Baka maging stressor pa nila pag hindi ko sila pinasmile. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. All right. So Marshall, were you able to take that? Yes, good.
Yes, I have it.
You have one more page? No more.
No, just one page.
All right. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. This is the third of our series. We have another one next week. So there it is on your screen. The Healing Energy is upcoming next Thursday. We're back to the 2 p.m. slot. So we hope you can join us. That's on Prana Healing. So we hope you can join us. And thank you once again for joining us this evening. And we'll be flashing also a short survey on your screens. If you could also kindly answer that survey and watch out for the deck through your emails. So we will be sending out the deck that Doc Bong shared with us this evening, together with the links that were shared with us also. A lot of thank you messages, Doc Bong. The late dinner was worth it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Tricky, nakapambahay daw siya. So, turn off muna. That's okay because it's past work hours. Pambahay is already acceptable. Thanks, Doc. Can't wait for your next session.